Hey everyone, welcome to our new webinar series designed to help create healthy dialogue between what matters to most to the CS leaders and the insights they can use. So as a quick intro, I'm Perry Betty. I'm co-founder and CEO of Tingono. This is my second AI company. My first one was in CX space that was acquired by Forrester. And prior to that, I used to work lead at Microsoft leading an AI team. So I have a little over a decade of experience in this space, and which eventually transitioned to Tingono. And at Tingono, we help companies to boost NRR and scale their CS motion with our AI CSM that we call Tara. So it's an agentic platform. I'm happy to tell you more about it. But in the process of building Tingono, over the last few years, I have ended up talking to hundreds of CS leaders, and again and again, we hear this one thing, and that is CS is struggling to demonstrate its impact on revenue, and unfortunately, this lack of impact or lack of perceived impact has resulted in certain outcomes which a lot of you might be familiar with. Number one is obviously, the shrinking teams, which basically means is that, a lot of pressure, headcount cuts. Not everyone has taken the dramatic steps like Twilio, for example, which kind of let go of their entire CS team, but the cuts have been far and deep. The second one, which is really like apparent, is also this like constantly dwindling influence. So CS has now or been seen as like a cost center. So they then do not have a seat at the revenue table, which basically means that when critical decisions are made about the future of the company, CS is just not involved. And then finally, which a lot of leaders have experienced, is this constant finger pointing, right? So a lot of blame is being placed on CS and CS leaders for the lack of growth. And CS leaders are now finding themselves a lot of times in a position where they're constantly being asked to literally justify their existence and the value they bring to the company. So, we thought like, hey, is there a solution to this conundrum, or is it just economy, right? Like eventually the economy will get better and everything will be nice and easy. So to answer these questions, I'm really excited to welcome Peter Hargetti, who has served both as a CCO and an executive directly responsible for revenue as a CMO. So he has seen both sides of the world, worn both hats, and really excited to have him here and share his perspective. So welcome, Peter.
Hey, thanks, Perry. Appreciate that. And yes, to Perry's point, so I have seen both sides of the equation, right? So responsible for both new logos, with sales and marketing, and also expansions and customer growth. And so it's been a real eye opener for me. So just as a quick background about myself, really I spent many years responsible for marketing. So for all inbound, outbound marketing and demand generation. During this time, I managed partner sales, both new and expansions through partners. Then I took over all direct new sales. And then finally, just more recently, in the past couple of years, I moved into customer success. One, I want to get even closer to customers. I do believe that customers are the lifeblood of every business, and I'm a huge customer advocate. So I want to get closer to them. And also, I want to create a seamless customer journey because I've seen, situations where that's not the case. And so at Intellect, where I was at most recently, which is a AI-powered SaaS company, that meant that I was responsible for renewals, expansions, churn reduction, ultimately NRR, right? So net revenue retention. And so here's what I've learned. So there is an uncomfortable truth, right? Which is that CS was meant to drive growth, and yet most CS teams are still treated as a cost center. At the same time, boards are asking, why isn't CS driving more revenue, right? I've heard this for a long time. More recently, here, what I'm really hearing though is, hey, how can AI help? And how can it help do that economically, right? So drive more revenue without spending more money.
Yeah,
So
that's so true. And we all hear that, like, do not spend money, but drive growth. I think like just the fact that some of the basically labs are growing like exponentially, hitting $100 million in 2 months without spending that much, that's put a lot of pressure on everyone. So
it,
maybe,
it,
Peter, good point to have like do a short poll to see, from the audience perspective, basically like, how are they using AI in their CS journey as well? So,
yeah, that'd be great. Let's do it.
all right. So I just launched it, and we can come back to it in a minute as people answer. Um, so we'll give it a minute here.
Okay,
Um,
great. So Perry, maybe as people answer it, just to
yeah,
kind of give like the business breakdown a little bit. So
sure.
just want to kind of talk about how, traditionally CS, I think, is measured on what I would kind of refer to as vanity metrics, right? So your NPS, your health scores, your activity volume, things like that. In the meantime, finance and your CEO is really looking at it from a different perspective, which is okay, so what is your net revenue retention? What is your expansion revenue? What's your gross churn? So there's a little bit of a disconnect. On the CS side, everyone loves to talk about activity, and it's critical, it's crucial. But activity doesn't always equal revenue. So I know some of you might be thinking CS teams find themselves in this situation for very little fault of their own. Um, and there are valid reasons for that. So it could be product shortcomings. The product is buggy, it's complicated, it's hard to use. Um, and CS, let's be honest, is trying to make up for some of these shortcomings. Um, so there's that. There's also a bad fit for customers. The pressure for growth is there for new logos too. I mean, believe me, I've seen it firsthand. And so sometimes you see an influx of bad fit customers, and that has a huge pressure on CS. So we need to be aware of all these things. Also, operational limitations, right? So CS doesn't always get all the resources that it wants, like you just mentioned, right? So that means money, headcount, etc. So really, what I want to talk about is what if CS could operate like a revenue team instead of a service team, and can achieve that within the budget constraints that we are all facing. So that's really what I'm hoping we can talk about. So if we can demonstrate direct impact on revenue as a CS leader, then all of these issues are solvable, in my opinion. You become critical focal point around which the company churns, right? Especially during these times when, let's be honest, new logos are harder to come by. So I really believe that there are two sides to the revenue equation, right? So new logos and then expansions. And expansions are just a huge, huge lever for SaaS companies or any business that has recurring business. So, and then maybe one other kind of like a personal note is having spent some time in marketing. I've long time, 20 plus years in marketing. Marketing shifted years ago from more of like a creative driven organization to a data driven operation. Um, so for example, conferences are fun. You meet people, great conversations. But oftentimes it's really hard to prove the ROI, especially compared to something like Google Ads, where, you can see the direct impact on revenue and ROI. So, I kind of see a similar shift occurring in customer success. And I think it's largely due to the rise of AI and especially agentic AI. So we're not just talking about pure chatbots. We're talking about so much more. And so, I think that's where there's so much excitement. Like you look at like health scoring, right? So, most CS orgs, they use health scores, built on, you've got your red, yellow, green labels. I mean, believe me, my dashboard looks like a Christmas tree. Uh, you've got weighted spreadsheets, you've got manual inputs from your CSMs, um, all lagging indicators, right? And they're often subjective, right? Especially your CSMs. They're great people, some of the hardest working people I know. But let's be honest, sometimes it's subjective, and we're all biased because we're human. So and also in many cases it's backward looking. So,
Right.
this is what we're all dealing with in the CS world, I think. So, so again, there's that human intuition, lagging indicators. Even when you try to be data driven, using rules, et cetera, it just kind of falls flat. Customers logging in for 20 support tickets might be in danger, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe it's the one that's only logging in twice or not logging in at all.
Right.
Right. So you don't know. I mean, you definitely have what I would call your quiet quitters, people who are who stop using your software, and it's hard to know. So, you know, uh, you got to be really careful with the data you have, and really at the end of it, going back to health scores, let's just assume for a second they are perfect. How do you act on it with limited resources, right? I mean, again, um, at least on my teams, I mean, we were always light on the
Right.
human, element, and we are people, and so, what that means is your most important accounts might get their attention, but there are so many other accounts that don't. So, how do you deal with these limited resources?
Wow, Peter, that's a lot of really great nuggets. I think, you hit on so many awesome points. So, I think the way, if I were to, like restate something you mentioned. So one is like, obviously we need to focus on NRR, just for survival, if anything. Um, Expansion is part of that. And then maybe we should talk about it in some other webinar because we're not talking about it today. We're focused on AI, more on agentic AI. But, I would just say that expansion is really interesting because historically, like revenue is considered a dirty word almost for CS, right? We were always thought of as like trusted advisor. So I'm not going to tell them more, even if it's going to help the customer to be better. You get more value out of the product. It's like something which is kind of considered dirty. But then there's another aspect which is like obviously churn mitigation, right? And that is a lot of times, you're right, is instinct driven. While we know, like technology, especially like AI now, is so good at helping you mitigate it, right? For example, all AI systems, like you talk about generative, predictive, ML, what have you, they're all like based on pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is the one which tells you what ChatGPT would type for you the next word, right? Based on what it has seen previously. So, why can't we identify patterns within like, our customers and then help you predict like almost 6 to 9 months in advance which customer is likely to churn and why, right? Your point about quiet quitters, very, very valuable because if you just look at historical data and say like, oh, this customer sent an angry email, so they're gonna churn. I mean, like that's too late, right? You need something which can, look at like the future and then tell us like, okay, this is what's happening. So I think for health scores. It's such a fit, and I think you mentioned that earlier as well. Like red, yellow, green. Like I think it's such a fit for AI, and I think that's a low hanging fruit which a lot of companies should really look into, because what AI can do, it can look at your historical data, it can bring in external signals, and then like I was saying earlier, tell you which customer is likely to churn and why. And that helps with a number of things. Number one is like prioritization, to your point about, hey, limited resources, what do I do with it? So, now the CSMs can focus on accounts which are at risk and also the reason for risk, right? So they're not over-serving, they're not under-serving. And also, a lot of things in life come back to the human element, and we'll talk about it. And, one of the human elements is the fact that even our best CSMs tend to go where they have their best relationships, not necessarily where data is telling them to go, right?
Right.
And being data driven means go where the risk is, fix that. So, the prioritization helps. And then secondly, by linking revenue outcomes to exactly what a customer values, what you're doing is you're ensuring the big NRR goal is always kept in mind, and you always execute on it. To give you like a concrete example, let's say like for one of our customers, AI identified that this customer is likely to churn because they're not using a certain product functionality, for example, right? So it's an adoption challenge. In that case, the AI can then automatically drive that adoption as well, right? Like for you. So, can take that step, help you further along with, basically your resource situations as well. Okay. And it can do 6 to 9 months in advance. So that's the key.
Yeah, which is so cool. I mean, I think that's what we're all looking for in the world of CS, right? Because oftentimes it is just way too late, and then you're moving, up, climbing a mountain. You can still save it, but potentially, but it's just so much more work versus getting those insights way earlier, so you can get ahead of it.
That's right. That's right. And then like it's not just getting ahead of it. It's also like how do you go ahead and you like act on it, right? Like that's where we are moving now, right? Sounds like it. With the agentic world, it's not just tell chatbot experience, tell me what it is, but help me do the work, right? And I think that was one of the reasons a lot of recently the stock market went down. People were like surprised by like that, and I was thinking like, why are you surprised? That's so obvious, because if AI is doing a lot of work, then all these seat-based systems where there's like all these SaaS companies really need to rethink their model. Just putting a chatbot on their website probably would not serve the purpose, right? You truly need something which can act as act for you, act on your behalf. So that's a different kind of model, right?
Yes, exactly. It is a different kind of model, and I think that's what we're all looking for. At least I am personally. I think that's and the idea for me, anyways, is not to replace people necessarily. It's that
Yeah.
now I wouldn't have to hire a bunch of new people, right? And I can leverage the team that exists who do have a lot of tribal knowledge and relationships, et cetera, and they can focus on that human element, and let the more manual tasks be taken care of by agentic AI. And so basically it becomes an assistant in many ways. But yeah, so no, like I think this is the future, and I think I want to learn more. I think many people here want to learn more.
Yeah. So like Peter, you and I were talking earlier, right? Like about agentic AI and so on, and then you were mentioning things like value realization, right? Like how hard it is, right, to achieve that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I do, yeah. So because look, I think at the end of the day, we all want to deliver value to the customer, right? Like that, and not just deliver it, but help them understand the value they're getting. So one of the challenges I always had is that, so how do we showcase to the customer the value they're getting? Obviously they see the value, but how do you really, make sure that you're showcasing it the right way? And it's tricky, right? Because I mean, the value is different for different customers. And so, it's, it can, you can't assume that value metrics are the same across all your customer segments, right? So each customer is unique, right? Just like you think about, like, I don't know, your competitors, right? That marketing perspective, they're all different. And so customers are different too. And so when you talk about, uh, showcasing value, it really needs to be kind of designed for each customer. And I think that's another area where I would think AI can really help to make that come to life.
Right. And I think you're absolutely right. And, because we think of like, when we think of CS, we think of discrete tasks which people have to do, right? Like expansion, churn prediction, like making sure, churn mitigation, I think, like instead of prediction. And then other is value realization. It's such a core task. And so we talked about how machine learning and AI can help you with health scoring and churn mitigation, but then value realization too. Like, agentic AI really, really shines in that We have seen this across the board where, once you're hooked into your company's data, you start, the AI is smart enough because it's like, it has the ability to look at thousands and thousands of variables at the same time. To your point about earlier, which you made, which I really liked, was like about the support tickets, right? Like, if you're as a human, you're looking just at the support tickets, you know, 20 support tickets, bad, too good. Like you might miss, like, what they call it, like you might miss the woods for the trees, or some metaphor.
Yes. Yes.
But AI doesn't have that human limitation, right? Like you can look at millions of variables at the same time and figure out what this customer really values. And then, because we all know the generative capabilities of LLMs today, it can generate these value realization scorecards, which we have seen what people have done is like they start dripping them to their customers. Now, let's be honest, like, customers are busy too. So a lot of times you don't hear back, which is fine, totally fine. Sometimes you hear back from a customer and they say like, oh, once you send them these value realization, which machine is generating for you, they'll respond back and ask a question. And that's where you get the human involved because, like you were saying earlier as well, humans are really good at building a connection, building the empathy. That's where I think the role of a human is really critical. So let machines do the work they do well, and then you bring in the human for what humans do well. Helps you scale as well, very effectively.
Exactly. It's just like a new form of teamwork, right? So, it's a new way of looking at the team.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, Peter, should we touch on expansion a little bit and, talk about that as another core element like health scoring, value realization? Maybe just what's your experience been with expansion and when you were driving it for your teams and how, like, yeah, tell
Yeah.
us more.
Let's do it. I mean, expansions is really close to my heart, so absolutely, let's jump in. I think oftentimes humans, they might wait for a customer asking about pricing or extra licenses being requested, which is always great, right? Like, love those phone calls. Hey, I need more licenses. Who doesn't love that? Or humans wait for a renewal conversation. Um, but I think, to your point, like, AI can identify these expansion propensities earlier, right? So, signals could be rapid adoption across, you know, uh, different departments, right? So you can see, oh, this department's really starting to like use the software more, or this one is. You can also look at like feature clustering that might help with add-on purchases, new user role creation patterns, increased workflow complexity, executive logins. Those are always great signals, right? And your CSM, they're not looking at that per se, but AI, I think, would be able to notice that, hey, an executive logged in, and that is something that needs to be um, tracked and be aware of. You can look at like competitive product comparisons and tickets. So these are all important. And what this all really enables, though, is it kind of creates this expansion playbook that is triggered automatically, right? Your CSMs can be alerted to a high expansion propensity, cross-selling, timing optimization. Therefore, you can be proactive about reaching out to the customer, reaching out to that executive or other executives. So I think there's a lot here that can help from an expansion standpoint.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. You're gonna say something?
No, it was just triggering thoughts in my head, and I cannot agree more. Right? Like it's just another way of looking at, like, let's say, churn mitigation. I think if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that we have this spectrum of signals. Executive logging in, customer asks for pricing, this, that, like all that massive amount of data. Now, if you go with what we have historically done is like rules-based systems, right? Okay, if a customer asks for pricing, let me serve them. What you're doing is you're missing these early signals, you're missing these opportunities, which just, humans are great, but this like multi-dimensional stuff, we just can't process, right? So you're missing all this. And then the external data point you mentioned is also very, very interesting because I was thinking, like we've seen with our bunch of our customers, they say like, oh yeah, for example, a new champion coming or like a champion leaving or a new executive joining a company could be a signal for risk or could be a signal for opportunity, right? But a lot of times, folks are so busy that, by the time they find that this has happened, it might be too late, right? So, for example, like I've heard these stories that where, oh, when we are preparing for our QBRs, we just find out the company got acquired 6 months ago. I wish I knew that, right? Because then I could have sold them more, right? Like because now it's a bigger opportunity and somebody else came in. So I think but again, AI has no limitations. It indexes everything online almost every day, and you can bring that in. You can build your workflows off that, and a lot of these things are available out of the box now. So it's the promise.
Yeah. But your comment about everyone being so busy, it did kind of trigger something in my mind, which is that, hey, let AI handle all the busy work. Yeah, that's I think what it's really great at, right? Like there is so much busy work in the world of CS, and I think AI can have a huge impact there. And then that allows, the CSMs to really focus on what's most important. So I do love that. But hey, I did have another kind of, I guess maybe a question for you.
Sure.
So, whenever I implement some new software, I'm always thinking about, the team, the culture, user adoption, right? Because we all know that if users don't adopt it, then the investment is minimal. So, I guess I have a question around like rolling out, this sort of solution. So, what kind of companies have you seen succeed with it, and which ones are struggling?
Yeah.
And I ask because to me, the mandate is very clear from the board, right? AI is, we all know it's fundamentally transforming our world, our technology, and we need to leverage it. Right? We need to drive more revenue at a lower cost, like we said in the very beginning. But I think there is still a human element to it, and it does go back to culture and user adoption. So what are your thoughts? What companies kind of are you seeing being very successful with it, and those that are struggling?
No, that's again like a really good question. And I was mentioning earlier in the intro, this is my second AI company.
Mm-hmm.
I remember with my first AI company, it was hard to convince executives at that time. We were talking like 6, 7 years ago. Where like, hey, there is value in AI and machine learning and so on, right? It was kind of like a gamble. But this time around, there's so much pull, like from the executives mostly, because they do understand the promise. They do understand this would be the most transformative, kind of revolution, at least in our lifetime, because we're old enough, we're young enough that industrial revolution happened so much before us, right? So I think it is the same level, but I do think I agree. To be able to really use it, we have to, undergo like a cultural transformation, and everything boils down to humans. I do think there's a fundamental aspect where humans will still be important. It's not that machines would take over everything, right? I would not be wanting to talk to machine right now, Peter. I would love talking to you. ChatGPT is ChatGPT, but so there's this empathy element, there's this strategic alignment element, which humans would be, and the relationship element, which humans would really be important. But then there are certain parts where I think the organizations really have to shift. And then I think, so my background is like computer science. I'm a computer engineer by training. And one of the fundamental things you have to learn when you start using AI systems is that these are probabilistic systems. These are not deterministic systems like traditional computer science. In traditional computer science, you have, if this happens, do this. Like click this button, always.
Right.
That's not how AI works across the board. These are based on probabilistic models. That's why, you see what you call hallucinations in GPT, because it is calculating the probability of the next word being the correct word, for example. This is why machine learning algorithms are, up to a certain efficacy or accuracy, if you will, right? So,
Hmm.
a lot of times you would find folks who would say like, oh, but this was incorrect in this one situation. Let's say,
Right.
predicting customer churn. So it
Yeah.
says, oh, this was predicting this customer is borderline, it's going to churn. I call them, but it didn't churn. So that's, but they were not at risk, right?
Right.
I agree. But then look at like you have 10,000 customers. It is maybe like incorrect on 100. And then,
Right.
what is the marginal cost of actually, making sure that even if there's like there's a problem with like the 100 are incorrect, it's predicting, you can still
Yeah.
send an email. What's the challenge? An email is generated for you. So, start thinking in those terms. Know that these systems will not be 100% accurate. I don't think that is the goal anyone is striving for. So, that's why we need human in the loop for critical systems. And that's, the second aspect. You have to start training the team, and team has to start thinking that they are working with these AI agents and they're their manager, right? Like, so instead of me doing all the work, I'm managing the work of these systems who would make mistakes. Now, 90% times, which is a goal, 90 to 95% is the accuracy you strive for, which is a gold standard, but there would be, instances where you'll have to lead as well. So that is a great place for a human to be in there. So, probabilistic systems, not deterministic. Do not let that hang you back. And then another thing, like, I have to say is like, which, people still get stumped is that these systems are very different than traditional SaaS systems you are used to. So by that, what I mean is like they feel sparse. So, for example, I was in a prospect call late last week, and they kept on like they were comparing us to a traditional CSV, right? So they're like, oh, what about like, and I kept on getting questions about what about like setting up this kind of workflow? What about this kind of report? And I really was trying to explain, and that this like the promise of AI is not that it'll help you do the same thing just a little bit better, because that is traditional computer science, right? Right, where
Right.
you get
Yes.
a
Yeah.
better. This is actually a little bit fundamentally different way of doing things. So AI does all the work for you. It comes back to you when it needs your input, or you can guide, or or even like for your guidance, you can provide those guidance, which means it is doing the work, so it doesn't have to be that cluttered for you, right? It doesn't like there's no like real concept of feature parity in a similar way. It doesn't need all those workflows for you to set up. You don't need to hire an admin to do all those things, because AI is doing this for you. And it was hard to explain to that
Yeah. But
prospect.
sorry to interrupt, Perry. But is it because you can just ask it and it kind of does it for you once you ask, and therefore you're kind of getting what you really need at that time? Or
Yeah, precisely, right? Like reports is a good example. Like, traditional CSVs would have like 100 reports, which you have to customize and blah, blah, blah. And then the executive would ask like, oh, what about this different thing? And then somebody will go spin. Uh, you don't need that anymore. Like you literally ask it like, hey, generate me a report,
yeah,
these things, and it'll give it to you. And I think
yeah,
executives are happy to ask that too, because they're going to ask someone anyways. Might as well ask
yeah,
the system to
yeah,
do this for you. So you really have to get to a point where you realize these systems are different, they work differently, and I think that's in my mind is what we call like being AI fluent. It is not just like, hey, you know, uh, I think people are scared with AI as well, and it's just human and natural. But I do think like there's a way for us to use these and use them effectively, but we just have to transform the culture as well,
yeah.
because
No, that
I don't
makes a
think
lot of
there's any bad.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. But I liked how you kind of phrased it, which is that like for the CSMs, like think of it as like the agentic AI is working for you, right? That way it's not a replacement, it's like it's working for you.
Yeah.
But it does sound like really it's key to set expectations, help people kind of understand the difference between, especially I think, agentic AI versus the kind of AI that we're all kind of familiar with, from ChatGPT or whatever you like to use. I do think there's a difference, and there's still a learning that's going on. So because it does sound like it's a fundamentally different way of doing things. But your comment about the dashboards or reports, I mean, it does resonate with me. I probably have 100 different reports. It's insane. And I forget, which ones are which ones, right? I mean, I have my core reports, and I think like what I'm kind of like hoping would be the case is like you have your core reports that you need to report on those because you need certain reports. But instead of having all these like seriously dozens and dozens of reports that I created on a Wednesday because I needed something,
Right.
um, I can now go to AI and ask for that specific need that I needed
That's
that
it.
day, right? So it really declutters my kind of like world that I'm in every day when I'm looking at my screen. So no, that all makes sense. So no, that's great.
Yeah. No, it is. And, I think culture transformation would be the most important one. I think, Peter, at the end of the day, I think, a lot of times we think of task and think of impact, but without the cultural change, I think it's not, nothing, what does it say? Like culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think that, and, yeah, it's not going away. Like it'll
No,
keep getting better,
no, it's definitely not going away. It's only going to be more,
yeah.
a part of our like daily fabric, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. So all right. Well, hey, I guess to kind of like bring it back, we really need to, I think, recognize AI as part of the equation, and it's a positive thing. I really think it is the solution that will
Yeah.
move CS from a support function into a revenue function. You've got scale plus speed plus statistical precision. It's a game changer.
Yeah.
So I think it's fantastic, and I'm excited about the future.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. How are we doing on time, by the way, Barry?
I think we're good on time, but I think we've already started having a lot of questions. I can see, and also we got the results of our poll,
Oh, great.
and so the poll, like let's dive into the poll right real quick.
Okay.
So the question was, where is your customer success team today with AI? And 51% of the audience thinks or says that they're experimenting with AI tools. That is great. 40% say they're using AI in pockets, like, health scoring, automation, reporting. Awesome.
Great.
And then, there's 9% to say AI is embedded in their CS operating model. So, kudos to the ones where it is, I guess, basically embedded. But it seems
Yeah.
like almost 100% is on the AI train, right? So it's not that people are like, hey, no, this is not for me, for example.
Right. Right. No, that is great. But you do have your early adopters, and I think those are the people who are, really kind of experimenting with more than just like Chat GPT, more than what, I don't know. We use HubSpot as our
Yeah,
CRM, right? And there's some AI in there and it does help a little bit, but it's not the kind of agentic AI that, we were talking about today. So I do
that's
think there's, quite a spectrum, if you will, in terms of like people who are kind of like leveraging some aspect of AI to be more productive. But then there's the other, end where it's really impacting, operations because it has access to, your actual data. And I think that's where you can really start having an impact on driving, revenue and NRR.
yeah. I couldn't agree more, Peter. I think if you can't drive revenue, unfortunately, the good old days of money is free and they're gone. Like, so I think we live in a real world. We have to be realist, right? Like in a lot of ways. So, Peter, thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, I can tell you every board conversation, really to go back to that comment. I mean, it's they are asking what are you doing? What can you do differently? And so I think it will help you have better, stronger board conversations as you
Right.
move forward.
That's right. So, Peter, thank you so much for sharing all these insights. And like before we move on to the Q&A, I would just like to say, if you want to learn more about Tingono or our AI CSM Tara, please, feel free to chat, reach out to us or even type the word demo in chat and we'll help you get scheduled. Um, and so now, Peter, maybe we should turn into Q&A. I know a few people have raised their hands, but some of the questions have come in too. So The first one is if a company has limited money to invest, uh, what would you recommend to implement to get the fastest bang for the buck? So, Peter, what would you think? Like, what would, in your experience, would be in AI sphere? And I can chime in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is again based on my experience so far. I mean, certainly, Chat GPT is very helpful, right? It helps write, great communications. It really does help improve, the quality of that communication. I think your CRM has some pretty good basic AI capabilities. So I think those solutions are certainly like a no-brainer for those who have a very limited budget. But I think this is a time where you do have to look at finding budget to really do, agentic AI that can move the needle. But Harry, I mean, I'm going to throw it back to you. Actually, I mean, you're probably better positioned than me on that one.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I think it's a spectrum. Again, like I'm a very pragmatic person. I think when it comes to these things, if you have $0, I won't even buy the subscription for ChatGPT. I'll help it. I'll put in some data, have it edit my emails or those kind of things, right? Like so, definitely go for that. Gemini is really good too. I like Gemini as well. Notebook LM, again a free option. But then I think if you do transform and you think like, okay, what are the like I want to spend money, I want to use the agentic stuff, and these don't have to cost you. I think you have to look at it as a cost in terms of headcount almost now. With agentic
That makes
system,
sense. Yep.
you hire one person, what is the headcount cost for that? Even if you hire like in a low cost locale, like even outsource and stuff, versus you hire an agent to support a bunch of people or do certain work. Like where does that parity lie? What kind of tasks they can do? We have customers who are like have hired agents, AI agents, and then overlay like one or two humans on top, and then they can do work for dozens of people, for example. So that's another way to look at it. But I would start with the task, like what is the task which takes the longest time and people complain the most. So if your people are complaining the most about creating QBR decks, for example, yeah, I can do that. If your people are complaining the most about creating the value realization scorecard, yeah, I can do that. Or finding CSQLs, definitely, yeah, I can do that. So start where the problem is.
Yeah, great point. Love that.
Okay, so next question. What are the AI-led actions you've worked well throughout the customer journey outside of just signaling to a CSM or a notification? So I think they're asking like, what else can agentic AI can do? So I can answer that, because for our system at least, yes, keeping humans informed is very critical. But there are a lot of things it can do in the background. So for example, it can, we talked about value realization. Similarly, it can also create, like for example, QBR decks. Now think of like when you're scaling your CS motion, you have this like long tail of customers, right? Like customers who get pay not that much, so you probably are not even doing QBRs with them, right? So with these auto-generated QBRs, you can send it to them, right? It can automatically email it to them, or share it with them on a customer site and say like, hey, this was your ROI, this is what you did, all that kind of stuff. So it's allowing you to provide this high level of service to a customer who was not even used to it. And I think that's, if you don't do it, someone else would do it kind of situation. So, that's another aspect where, AI really, really does well. Like it can actually start servicing the customers who were, in my parlance, ignored until now, right? And that simply because we did not have the economic like aspects to actually serve them to the degree we should have.
Right. No, 100%. No, I love this actually because, I mean, we do QBRs for, our largest customers, but there are so many, and that takes a lot of work, by the way, preparing for those. But so if there's a way to help that, right? So again, it's kind of like an assistant to the CSM. But then there are so many other customers that are, like you said, kind of ignored or they're addressed when they have a problem or what have you, right? But otherwise, it's very reactive, right? And that, I guess that's the thing, right? And this is the challenge I have is like, how do you move from being reactive to predictive? And I think this sort of thing where you can again provide maybe a digital QBR, right? It's just
That's
an
right.
update once a quarter. It really does allow you to touch those customers that otherwise are kind of not, I guess ignored is the right word, honestly. And so that way they'll see, and it's a great way to again like highlight the value they're getting, right? Because oftentimes they don't know, like, hey, how many times are they really, uh, or how many people are using the system, and what does that really mean in terms of value, right? So there's a way to automate that using AI and share those sort of results. That's showcase the value. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So the last question, Seth is asking to expand auto-generated QBR report cards, all motion that work well to drive adoption. Seth, I'm not sure I understand the question fully, but yes, like AI can drive adoption, and it's I think one of the easiest ways to leverage AI as well, because instead of like drive when humans do it and we do it based on templates, or historically we have done it based on templates, what we end up doing is driving adoption for all the bells and whistles in your product, right? Like products are so complicated now. So, but a customer might not actually need it. What AI has the ability to do is like really focus on what this customer needs and then kind of like, drive the adoption for that as well. Okay. All right. So the next question, I think, yeah. Oh, okay. So Seth put in a clarifying question. Outside of QBR and report cards, what are the other solutions AI can do? So I think that was more the question. Do you want to take a stab at that, Peter? Like, what are the things you believe AI should be able to do? And we can talk about then, like maybe, what it can do today, besides like things like QBRs and so on.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to give you my perspective, being in that seat in terms of what I would love it to do. So, yeah, I mean, I think I would love it to really understand or showcase, not
Yeah.
showcase, sorry, like predict what's occurring, without my team being in the thick of it. I think oftentimes you have, so many distractions in this world of CS that you can oftentimes just like get lost in that, and you are kind of like really in the weeds, and you kind of
Right.
like it's hard to see through that. So being able to have a clear direction on what's happening and what to do, I think that's one of the key things is like if there's a way to help you know kind of like showcase what to actually do, what action to take, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I think you're so right. So I think, again, like, yes, if you look at traditional sense, like what are the tasks we do today, right? We, as a CSM, right? Like we do things like, health scoring, we will do like QBRs, we'll do EBRs, risk mitigation plans, value realization, and so on and so forth. So all the tasks could be done by AI to a varying degree, right? Like, again, 80% of the way in certain cases, 90% of the way in certain cases. We know that that's true today. Maybe it'll change. But I think, Peter, maybe what you're alluding to, and I think something I'm super excited about as we look at future is, and we talk about it just a little bit about, it'll change the way you work and the products will look different. So I think it'll actually, from the task perspective, it is starting to figure out like, hey, maybe these tasks needs to be done, and these don't need to be done, or these need to be done in completely different manner, and these need to be done by a human. So, like in certain instances, it is recommending that, like, okay, as a human, you should reach out to this person with this message, out of the blue, because they need a touch point. You would not have thought about it, but it is recommending that. So I think we will start seeing those kind of instances as well, where it is like trying to help you, be more productive, I guess.
No, I think that makes sense. And then, so in some cases, can just do it on its own, and then if there's a response, then the human gets involved. Or because what I really kind of see this like bifurcation. Maybe that's the wrong word, but like there's a certain group of customers that just requires that like hand holding, and then there's another group where it's you just don't have the resources to manage them, as well as that first group. And so it's almost like if there's a way to like equalize, right, where they're all getting the same attention, but the customer doesn't really know they're in group A versus group B, that would be really cool. Does that make
Yeah,
sense, by the way?
it does. It does totally to me because like we have two kinds of customers. Like, or I'll give you an example. Like, so one of our customers, they basically want AI to reach out and like even for renewals, right? AI can do that, right? Like, and say your renewal is coming up. This is what you did this year. Thank you so much and blah blah blah. Please, we're not like it's auto renewal, so it'll go. Customer complaints back. They can bubble it up to human, but then they have like a really good process, like where they say like, oh, if the customer complains and says like, hey, what is this like 5% increase? AI can answer that. It says like, oh, it's a standard contractual increase, no need for human. And this company is managing, like a huge number of accounts with just 8 CSMs. So, but then if the customer complains and says like, oh, what about like I want to cancel because of pricing, that's a trigger word to get the, just to get like really the human involved. So, we are starting to see like those kind of, like it's evolving into that as well.
Yep. Okay. Great. Great.
Um, so I think we have time for one more question or a few more questions. So one question comes from Adam. Probabilistic models are only as good as the data that feeds them. Based on your experience, is this a major barrier to implementing AI on a larger scale, especially for predictive purposes? And thank you, Adam. He's saying he appreciates about my optimism about humans not being replaced by AI. So, I actually really, it's not optimism. I think I truly believe that. Yeah, thank you, Adam. So yes, data quality, data efficacy is important. But I'll tell you that I've never met a company or I've never seen a data which like, or met a person who says our data is perfect. Data is always what it is. But one thing with the modern AI systems is that they are able to filter out the noise. They are able to, figure out what is relevant and what is not. So let's say you're making predictions based on just like, let's say, just CRM data and product data, right? Like two aspects of it. Let's not forget all the other customer journey data which you can bring in. So, and in CRM, it notices, oh, this customer always complains, right? There are complainers which would never churn, right? So, that could be like a kind of like a data point. It'll pick up, and a human, if they're analyzing it, they'll say like, oh, this customer is in danger. But because it is looking at other data points, it is able to discern those things. I think the way I would say, without getting too technical, is AI doesn't understand data like we do. For it, like for us, like pricing means something, number of calls means something. For AI, like, and I'm not that, I don't even know what it means for it. But what I do know is it converts it into math and just looks at patterns. So on a vector plane, it is able to figure these things out. It is able to tune out the noise to a large degree. So, I would not be like kind of like apprehensive because of that. I think waiting for like data to be perfect would never happen. I don't think it'll, just gonna happen. But yeah, you can start small. You can start with a couple of data sources, bring in the external data. Typically, CRM data is the best to start with because you have good up like wherever the revenue lives, right? Like opportunities, typically people manage them well because otherwise you don't even know how much you're making and how much you're losing. So I think I'll start there, and that should be a good place to start. I don't know, Peter, anything to
Yeah.
add?
So I wanted to kind of add on to the question more than to answer it. Just to add on to it. So, I've been in situations where I have strong CRM data, worked really hard for, CRM hygiene and good data, but limited product data, essentially like just being able to see like login and like the time, not like all the, you know, um, uses of the various features and functionalities that the software offers. So, you know, in a case like that, like how could AI, so obviously it has the CRM aspect, it has some limited product data. Like, is that enough to help an AI system,
Yeah,
perform efficiently?
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I think so. I think like, again, things it'll improve the more data it has and so on, right? Like, and where it does improve is like, so a lot of these systems are now, like at least for Tingono, um, it is explainable system. And I think that kind of dives into the next question as well, which is about like, how does AI drive adoption? So, precisely. So let's assume that, AI looks at your CRM data, your product telemetry data, and predicts that a customer is at risk, right? In 6 to 9 months from now. And so like these systems now are, at least Tara is explainable. So it'll say like this customer is at risk because of these reasons. And one of the reasons could be that they're not using this product functionality really well. So, let's say you never had the product telemetry data, or the product telemetry data was obscure, right? Like obscure in the sense that, like instead of being captured at the functionality level, maybe it was just captured at like a higher level where it's saying, this is the total usage across the board. So,
Right.
AI would say they're not using the product instead of saying, oh, they're not using this one functionality. So that's where it, like adding more data helps, right? Because the explainability improves, right? Explainability from a human perspective improves, right? Like that's it's very critical to see like what agencies and what we see.
Right.
So it improves the explainability, and that's where more data, better data really, really helps, to be honest. And
Yep.
then based on that explainability is where it tries to add. So in this case, if it says like, okay, they're not using this product functionality very much, let me actually reach out to them and say, illustrate to the customer, illustrate the benefits of this functionality, and also if you can find like a knowledge base article, include that, or include a tutorial on how to use it. So it can, start and then, follow up and say like, hey, were you able to use it? Or, what happened? And, so that kind of stuff. So just, do that for you. Now, it can totally do that. But if the data is at a state where it is not using, then yes, you need to get a human involved and say, hey, notice that you're not using it so much. Can we chat? Something like that. So I think there's that blend between data and machine and so on.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Okay. I think with that, we have 2 minutes left. We can give back to people. I think we're done with the questions as well. So, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Peter, again.
Thank you for having me.
Please reach out if you have more questions. Peter and I are happy to answer as well. Thank you.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.